Bear in mind that before he died he said he did not blame anyone. Pilate raised a finger significantly. Pilate's face was twitching. And he himself would surely have taken something. You are cruel, and he was not cruel. Where will you go? Levi suddenly came up to the table, leaned both hands on it, and, gazing at the procurator with burning eyes, whispered to him. Know, hegemon, that I am going to kill a man in your Shalem. I wanted to tell you that, so you'd know there will be more blood. I, too, know there will be more of it, replied Pilate. You haven't surprised me with your words. You want, of course, to kill me? You I won't manage to kill, replied Levi, baring his teeth and smiling. I'm not such a foolish man as to count on that. But I'll kill Judas of Kiriath. I'll devote the rest of my life to it. Here pleasure showed in the procurator's eyes, and beckoning Matthew Levi to come closer, he said, You won't manage to do it, don't trouble yourself. Judas has already been killed this night. Levi sprang away from the table, looking wildly around, and cried out. Who did it? Don't be jealous, Pilate answered, his teeth bared, and rubbed his hands. I'm afraid he had other admirers besides you. Who did it? Levi repeated in a whisper. Pilate answered him. I did it. Levi opened his mouth and stared at the procurator, who said quietly. It is, of course, not much to have done, but all the same I did it. And he added, well, and now will you take something? Levi considered, relented, and finally said, Have them give me a piece of clean parchment. An hour went by. Levi was not in the palace. Now the silence of the dawn was broken only by the quiet noise of the sentry's footsteps in the garden. The moon was quickly losing its color, one could see at the other edge of the sky the whitish dot of the morning star. The lamps had gone out long, long ago. The procurator lay on the couch. Putting his hand under his cheek, he slept and breathed soundlessly. Beside him slept Banga. Thus was the dawn of the 15th day of Nisan met by the 5th procurator of Judea, Pontius Pilate. Chapter 27. The end of apartment number 50. When Margarita came to the last words of the chapter, thus was the dawn of the 15th day of Nisan met by the 5th procurator of Judea, Pontius Pilate, it was morning. Sparrows could be heard in the branches of the willows and lindens in the little garden, conducting a merry, excited morning conversation. Margarita got up from the armchair, stretched, and only then felt how broken her body was and how much she wanted to sleep. It is interesting to note that Margarita's soul was in perfect order. Her thoughts were not scattered, she was quite unshaken by having spent the night supernaturally. She was not troubled by memories of having been at Satan's ball, or that by some miracle the Master had been returned to her, that the novel had risen from the ashes, that everything was back in place in the basement in the lane, from which the snitcher Aloisi Mogarich had been expelled. In short, acquaintance with Woland had caused her no psychic damage. Everything was as if it ought to have been so. She went to the next room, convinced herself that the Master was soundly and peacefully asleep, turned off the unnecessary table lamp, and stretched out by the opposite wall on a little couch covered with an old, torn sheet. A minute later she was asleep, and that morning she had no dreams. The basement rooms were silent, the builder's whole little house was silent, and it was quiet in the solitary lane. But just then, that is, at dawn on Saturday, an entire floor of a certain Moscow institution was not asleep, and its windows, looking out on a big asphalt-paved square which special machines, driving around slowly and droning, were cleaning with brushes, shone with their full brightness, cutting through the light of the rising sun. The whole floor was occupied with the investigation of the Woland case, and the lights had burned all night in dozens of offices. Essentially speaking, the matter had already become clear on the previous day, Friday, when the Variety had had to be closed, owing to the disappearance of its administration and all sorts of outrages which had taken place during the notorious séance of black magic the day before. But the thing was that more and more new material kept arriving all the time and incessantly on the sleepless floor. Now the investigators of this strange case, which smacked of obvious devilry, with an admixture of some hypnotic tricks and distinct criminality, had to shape into one lump all the many-sided and tangled events that had taken place in various parts of Moscow. The first to visit the sleepless, electrically lit up floor was Arkady Apollonovich Sempliarov, chairman of the Acoustics Commission. After dinner on Friday, In his apartment located in a house by the Kameni Bridge, the telephone rang and a male voice asked for Arkady Apollonovich. Arkady Apollonovich's wife, who picked up the phone, replied sullenly that Arkady Apollonovich was unwell, had retired for the night, and could not come to the phone. However, Arkady Apollonovich came to the phone all the same. To the question of where Arkady Apollonovich was being called from, the voice in the telephone had said very briefly where it was from. This second at once this minute babbled the ordinarily very haughty wife of the chairman of the Acoustics Commission, and she flew to the bedroom like an arrow to rouse Arkady Apollonovich from his bed, where he lay experiencing the torments of hell at the recollection of yesterday's séance and the night's scandal, followed by the expulsion of his Saratov niece from the apartment. Not in a second, true, yet not in a minute either, but in a quarter of a minute, Arkady Apollonovich, with one slipper on his left foot, in nothing but his underwear, was already at the phone, babbling into it. Yes, it's me, I'm listening. His wife, forgetting for these moments all the loathsome crimes against fidelity in which the unfortunate Arkady Apollonovich had been exposed, kept sticking herself out the door to the corridor with a frightened face, poking a slipper at the air and whispering. Put the slipper on, the slipper, you'll catch cold, at which Arkady Apollonovich, waving his wife away with his bare foot and making savage eyes at her, muttered into the telephone. Yes, surely I understand, I'll leave at once. Arkady Apollonovich spent the whole evening on that same floor where the investigation was being conducted.